Hey guys, another one take review, and today I want to talk about the PJ Harvey semi-classic Dry. Dry is, of course, the debut album from PJ Harvey, released in 1992, and PJ Harvey is, of course, an artist that has just grown since the early 90s to become what is arguably one of the most beloved and adored songwriters of the alternative scene. However, I should say, theoretically, Dry isn't a PJ Harvey album. It is, but it was PJ Harvey the band, as this was technically the era of the PJ Harvey Trio. However, I'm not going to refer to it as the PJ Harvey Trio throughout the rest of this video. I just wanted to make sure anyone watching this recognizes that I do realize that fact, but from this point moving forward, I'm just going to face facts and say that PJ Harvey steals virtually all of the spotlight here, and rightfully so. She's one of the most electric performers that I've ever heard. But nonetheless, this is through and through a PJ Harvey outing for me. But anyways, like I was saying, this was her debut record, and even though she had released some demos, she had been on a John Peel curated split album that also had the Faith Healers and Stereo Lab on it. This was the record where PJ Harvey not only found her true voice and her true aesthetic, but the sound that would define her earlier years. PJ Harvey has always been, at least in my eyes, one of the most underrated vocalists in not only rock music or alternative music, but just music in general. A lot of her influence comes from some of those early abstract experimental blues kind of guys like Captain Beefheart that really pushed the limit of how far you could go before the blues wasn't the blues, before experimental went beyond just the word experimental, etc., etc. And that really does show in Dry's sense of sort of light dissonance. Again, it never gets as crazy as the aforementioned Captain Beefheart, and you shouldn't go into this album expecting, like, The Residents or something crazy like that, something wildly experimental that'll really just, blow your mind because it's so insanely out there and it's, not even music anymore. But nonetheless, the shrieks and howls that PJ Harvey deliver here are absolutely influenced by that style. With that being said, PJ Harvey's tone and vocal cadence are still very similar to her peers from the 90s alt rock scene. A lot of that can, of course, be traced back to the more melodic or more structured side of classic punk music, like Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees. And again, I do think that shows, and I think that's arguably her most direct influence throughout this record. But either which way, PJ Harvey has a stunning voice that goes perfectly with the lyricism, which I'll talk about in a little while, and also is just absolutely raw and vicious, and a lot of thanks that needs to be given for that aspect of her voice really should be given to the production who were able to perfectly capture that. Dry was primarily produced by Rob Ellis and Head, with the latter having one of the worst pseudonyms I've ever heard in all of the music industry, but that point aside, it was mainly produced by the two of them, and they're mainly known as PJ Harvey collaborators. They would continue to work on future albums like Rid of Me and Is This Desire, but they've also worked with some other artists like Placebo, Marianne Faithfull in her later career, Massive Attack, for example. There's a fair range of artists that the two have worked with, but they're primarily known for working with PJ Harvey, and they, as you can see here, have been with her since day one. While this doesn't have the same purposefully hollow and empty sound engineering that would be delivered on her follow-up sophomore album Rid of Me, thanks to Big Black member Steve Albini, I do think that Dry is a perfect capturing of just how absolutely garagey and raw and destructive PJ Harvey could be as a performer. I mean, every howl and shriek that she delivers, every power chord that she plays, which is pretty much every single chord on the album, every lyric that she sings or sometimes screams out, is perfectly captured in a way that's not too dissimilar from machinery in a garage. It's in this way that Dry works not only as the rowdy debut album of an individual who will go on to become one of England's most praised musicians, but it also works as a piece of dark, violent, and often bluesy alternative rock. Dry is equally loose and unrestrained in terms of instrumentals as well, which range from the blues punk kind of sound that you find on tracks like Victory to the chaotic, crashing down walls of punkish noise rock that you found on songs like Sheila and the Gig. PJ Harvey's classic grunge-like guitar work, Rob Ellis's carelessly passionate drumming, and some very uniquely toned but very pleasant bass work from a variety of sessions bassists makes for what is easily one of the most garage-like, but still just absolutely intoxicatingly well performed in all the wrong ways sort of album. This entire record is really just one giant catastrophic wave of fervency, and I absolutely adore it. And I'm just saying that it's not exactly the best thing ever in terms of instrumentals. I mean, will you go into Dry with, your third eye now being open from the simple strum of just a few chords? No, but it will sucker punch you in the stomach and then kick you in the side of the head as you're writhing on the ground. And I don't think that you could really ask for that much more from an early PJ Harvey album. As I've stated multiple times in this review up to this point, PJ Harvey is easily one of the most just beloved and decorated singer-songwriters of the post-1960s era of music. After all, she is the only artist to win the Mercury Prize not once but twice, and you only need to just take a dive into her disturbed and cryptically sexual lyrics to really understand where all of that love comes from. PJ Harvey's lyricism on songs like Happy and Bleeding are eerily beautiful, but not in the way that you exactly would expect them to be. It's sort of like she takes on this sort of mysterious siren-like kind of character as she writes, and she's just as likely to sort of pull you in and entice you as she is to grab you by the throat and drag you to the bottom of the ocean. And I do think that's one of the greatest appeals of not only this album, not only this period of PJ Harvey's music, but PJ Harvey's music in general. While she definitely doesn't have the exact same sense of the confrontation of the disturbing that peer and also future romantic partner Nick Cave would have at roughly the same time, PJ Harvey really carves out her own path here in terms of lyricism and creates something that's both deadly and beautiful with just the right amount of nuance. Overall, Dry was an amazing debut from PJ Harvey slash the PJ Harvey Trio, whatever you prefer to call it, that would ultimately spark what is now one of the most consistent discographies in all of alternative music. Harvey's then violently raw performance style and songwriting put in such a garage-like atmosphere really was just bound from the start to make something nothing short of explosive, and it's for that reason that I have to give this album 4.5 stars out of 5. It's just a truly enchanting record, but not enchanting in the way of these beautiful chord progressions. It is a filthy, just dynamite-like record. It's just something very unique in not only PJ Harvey's discography, as I would say it's even rawer than albums like Rid of Me, but I do think it's also a unique place as far as her songwriting goes. I think that she would technically master things a bit more on albums like the aforementioned To Bring You My Love, with songs like Down by the Water, that sort of mysterious, creepy, eerie aspect, but there's just something about the sort of just violence almost of the casual rawness of her songwriting on this album that I think makes it really stand out in her discography, which is something hard to do considering pretty much every single one of her albums is at least a solid 4 or higher. But anyways, with that being said, 4.5 stars out of 5, fantastic record. And with that being said, that is the end of this review as well. So I will see you guys in the next one.